In the heart of a forgotten town, there stood an ancient, crumbling mansion known to the locals as Hollow House. I, an avid explorer of abandoned places, had heard tales that kept even the bravest away. But curiosity, like a persistent whisper, urged me forward. It was a chilly, moonless night when I approached the gate. The air was thick with fog, almost tactile, as if it were trying to push me back. I clutched my flashlight tighter and stepped through the rusted gates. The path to the mansion was overgrown, the branches clawing at my clothes as I pushed my way forward. As I approached the front door, it creaked open by itself, revealing the dark maw of the house. Just the wind, I muttered to myself, trying to quell the rising fear. The flashlight's beam seemed feeble against the engulfing darkness inside. "Hello?" I called out, my voice a mere echo in the vast hallway. I began to explore, the floorboards groaning underfoot. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, and every shadow seemed to twitch just outside my line of sight. "It's just an old house," I reassured myself, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step. In the living room, the air turned colder, my breath visible in the flashlight's glow. I scanned the room with my light, and that's when I saw it, a figure, pale and translucent, staring back at me from the corner. I froze, my heart pounding, as it whispered, "Leave." Refusing to let fear win, I steeled myself and moved closer. The figure became clearer, a woman, her eyes hollow, her mouth agape in a silent scream. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The apparition pointed upstairs, her finger trembling. "Find me," she breathed, before vanishing into thin air. Heart racing, I ascended the creaky staircase. Each step seemed to scream a warning. At the top, the hallway stretched into darkness, doors lining each side. My flashlight flickered as I walked, the shadows seeming to pulsate. I tested each door, finding rooms shrouded in dust and decay, but nothing more. Then, at the end of the hall, one door was different. It was cleaner, almost polished, with a faint light seeping from the edges. My hand shook as I reached for the knob, the metal cold and smooth. I pushed the door open, the light within blinding. When my eyes adjusted, I found myself in a child's room, the walls covered in cheerful wallpaper. But the air was heavy, charged with a silent dread. Toys lay scattered on the floor, arranged in a circle around a single, rocking chair that moved slightly, as if just vacated. "Who are you playing with?" I called out, my voice quivering. Laughter, high and chilling, answered me, bouncing off the walls. "Join us," a chorus of whispers invited. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness to reveal nothing but the empty room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. My flashlight died, leaving me blind in the suffocating black. "No, no, no," I stammered, fumbling for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at my chest, my breaths coming in sharp gasps. Then, just as suddenly, a small, cold hand slipped into mine. "Don't be afraid," a child's voice giggled right next to my ear. I screamed, pulling away, but the grip tightened. "We just want to play," the voice insisted, pulling me toward the circle of toys. I struggled, but the child's grip was unnaturally strong. My heart thundered, my screams swallowed by the thick walls of the mansion. And then, the whispers grew louder, a symphony of voices filling the room, telling me their tales of sorrow and pain, their lives cut short by tragedy. The flashlight flickered back to life, and I was alone. No child, no hand, nothing but the rocking chair, still swaying gently. I stumbled back, gasping for air, the door suddenly swinging open. I didn't look back as I sprinted down the hallway, the echoes of the children's laughter following me. I burst out of the mansion, the night air a welcome relief. But as I glanced back, the light in the child's room flickered once more, and a shadow passed the window. My heart sank. I knew then that the stories were far from over. Hollow House still had secrets, its residents eager to share them. I walked away, but a part of me lingered, tied to the spirits that dwelled within. The experience haunted me, whispers in my dreams, a constant reminder that some places are better left unexplored. However, the tale doesn't end here. As I write this, the pull of Hollow House tugs at the edges of my mind, a siren call that I am powerless to ignore. I know I will return, for the story is incomplete, and the shadows beckon for me to dive deeper into the mysteries that await. Days passed, but the echo of Hollow House haunted every waking moment and invaded my dreams. Sleep became a battleground, my mind replaying the eerie laughter and the cold, unyielding grip of the ghostly child. Compelled by an unseen force, I found myself drawn back to the mansion as if it held the key to a locked part of my soul. This time, I arrived at dusk, the sky a tapestry of orange and purple. The air was still, unnervingly so, as if the world held its breath. I stood before the gate, my hand trembling as I pushed it open. The path seemed more hostile now, the overgrown branches like hands reaching out to stop me. As I approached the front door, it swung open slowly, creaking on its hinges. The darkness inside seemed denser, more aggressive than before. I stepped inside, the air cold and thick with the scent of decay. "I'm back," I whispered, my voice sounding foreign in the oppressive silence of the foyer. My flashlight flickered to life, its beams slicing through the darkness. The house seemed to breathe around me, the walls whispering secrets in a language I couldn't understand. I made my way to the staircase, each step creaking ominously under my weight. The house felt alive, aware of my presence. As I reached the top of the stairs, a cold wind brushed past me, sending shivers down my spine. The corridor was shrouded in darkness, the doors lining it like silent sentinels. I felt drawn to one door in particular, its frame slightly ajar, emitting a faint, flickering light from within. Pushing the door open, I entered what looked like a study. Books lined the walls, their pages yellowed with age. In the center of the room, a desk sat under a window, moonlight illuminating an open journal. As I approached, the pages rustled, as though touched by an unseen hand. The handwriting was elegant but frantic, speaking of loss and despair. "I see you found my diary," a voice whispered, so close I could feel the breath against my ear. I spun around, flashlight darting across the room, but there was nobody there. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Read and you will understand," the voice whispered, sadness lacing every syllable. I turned back to the journal, the entries detailing the life of a woman named Elisabeth, who had once owned the house. The more I read, the colder the room became, until I could see my breath clouding in the air. Elisabeth wrote of her daughter, a young girl named Marie, who had vanished one night, her disappearance never solved. As I reached the last entry, the room grew darker, the moonlight blotted out by a creeping fog outside. The temperature dropped, and I could feel a presence behind me. Refusing to turn around, I whispered, "Elisabeth, is that you?" Silence filled the room, then a single, heart-wrenching sob broke it. "Yes," the voice came, filled with a mother's pain. "Help me find her, please." The sorrow in her words was palpable, and I felt a tug at my heart. "I'll help you," I promised, though I had no idea how. The air shifted, the temperature rising slightly as if in gratitude. I left the study, guided by an inexplicable pull towards the attic. The house groaned around me, the staircase to the attic narrow and steep. Cobwebs brushed against my face as I ascended, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the thick dust that filled the air. The attic was cramped, filled with trunks and old furniture covered in white sheets. As I moved deeper, a chill settled over me, stronger than before. My flashlight flicked over a small, locked trunk. As I touched it, the air around me stilled, and a voice, clear and terrifying, boomed through the room, "Do not open it." I recoiled, heart racing. "Who's there?" I called out, shining the light around the attic. In the corner, a shadow moved, elongating and twisting until it formed the figure of a man, his features obscured by darkness. "Leave now," he hissed, his voice a snake's whisper. Frozen in fear, I could only watch as the shadow approached, its form becoming clearer. He was tall, his eyes hollow pits of despair. "This doesn't concern you," he growled, his voice echoing around the cramped space. Yet, despite the fear, a surge of defiance rose within me. "This house is full of pain," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I will not leave until I've helped Elisabeth find her daughter." The shadow paused, then let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the house. I braced myself, knowing this confrontation was far from over. The house itself seemed to respond, the walls creaking louder, the wind howling through the broken windows. I stood my ground, determined to uncover the truth of Hollow House and the spirits trapped within its walls. The shadow lunged at me, but I did not flinch. Instead, I stepped forward, ready to face whatever horrors awaited. The shadow loomed over me, its presence overwhelming, dark tendrils of malice swirling around it. "You cannot save them," it hissed, voice dripping with venom. The attic felt smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating. Yet, my resolve only hardened. "I must try," I replied, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. Suddenly, the room brightened as if a switch had been flipped. Elisabeth appeared beside me, her form flickering like a flame in a strong wind. "Do not listen to him," she pleaded, her voice a delicate whisper against the storm of the shadow's anger. Her hand, cold and translucent, brushed against mine, a surge of energy bolstering my courage. "Why do you torment these souls?" I demanded, facing the dark figure. The shadow paused, its form wavering, then solidified as if drawing strength from the darkness itself. "They are mine," it roared, the floorboards shaking beneath us. Elisabeth's face twisted in pain, and I felt her sorrow as if it were my own. Determined to free Elisabeth and her daughter, I stepped forward, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, aiming at the heart of the shadow. "I will release them from your grasp," I shouted over the howling wind that had risen within the confines of the attic. The shadow recoiled as if the light burned it, its form shrinking momentarily. Behind me, a soft murmur rose, whispers of countless voices, building in strength. The spirits of the house were rallying, their presence fueling my resolve. "Help me," I called out to them, and the air shimmered with their response, a chorus of ethereal voices crying out in unity. The shadow, sensing the shift in power, attacked, a blur of darkness rushing towards me. I dodged, feeling it pass by, a coldness that bit into my very soul. Elisabeth screamed, a sound of both fear and defiance. "Marie," she called into the darkness. "Marie, come to me." From the shadows, a new figure emerged, small and hesitant. It was Marie, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She looked towards her mother, then back at the dark figure that had claimed them. "Mama?" Her voice was a tentative whisper, breaking the tension like a knife through silk. "Come, darling," Elisabeth reached out, and Marie moved towards her, each step tentative but determined. The dark figure howled in rage, its form expanding, trying to envelop the room in its darkness. But the other spirits were there, their light growing, a radiant force that began to push back against the darkness. I joined them, my own voice rising in a chant I didn't know I remembered, words of release and freedom. The attic filled with light, the shadows retreating, shrieking as they went. The figure writhed, its form becoming indistinct, its edges fraying. "You cannot do this," it bellowed. "I am eternal." But its words were losing power, the confidence waning as the light grew stronger. Elisabeth and Marie joined hands, their combined glow a beacon in the swirling chaos. Their eyes met mine, gratitude and sorrow mingling in their depths. "Thank you," Elisabeth mouthed, her voice lost in the crescendo of escaping spirits. The room was now a vortex of light and shadow, the battle tipping in our favor. But the shadow was not yet defeated, its course still a potent force of darkness. It lunged at me one last time, desperation giving strength to its form. I braced myself, chanting louder, the words a shield around me. Just as the shadow reached me, the light surged, a brilliant explosion of energy that threw me to the ground. My head hit the wooden floor, and I blinked against the brightness that filled my vision. When I looked up, the attic was calm, bathed in a soft, gentle light. The spirits, Elisabeth and Marie included, were fading, their forms dissipating like mist in the morning sun. "Go in peace," I whispered, my voice hoarse. They smiled, their forms becoming translucent, and then they were gone, leaving behind a silence that was both empty and full. I stood slowly, my body aching, the events of the night catching up to me. The attic seemed just an attic now, dusty and forgotten. But the energy was different, it felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. As I descended the stairs, the house felt different, no longer a prison of despair, but just an old building, its stories played out. Yet, I knew the tale was not quite over. There were more secrets hidden within these walls, waiting to be uncovered. The shadow had mentioned being eternal, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter was just a temporary victory. Stepping out into the night, the air felt fresher, the sky clearer, as if the house itself had exhaled a long-held breath. I walked away, knowing that my connection to Hollow House was not severed, that the story would call me back. It was a beginning, not an end, a chapter closed, but not the book. Hollow House still held mysteries, and I would return, drawn by the threads of the unseen, ready to uncover. Walking away from Hollow House that night, the chill of the evening seemed to cling to me, a tangible reminder of the supernatural forces I'd encountered. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the ground. Every rustle of the leaves, every whisper of the wind, felt like the spirits murmuring, their voices caught on the breeze. Despite the victory in the attic, a sense of unease gnawed at me, a persistent whisper that this wasn't over. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow's warning of its eternity had been more than mere bravado. The thought plagued me, a relentless specter, as I made my way back to my car parked under the skeletal branches of an old oak tree. The drive home was silent, the usual hum of the car's engine now a foreboding drone. My mind replayed the night's events over and over, analyzing every detail, every word spoken by the spirits. As I approached my house, the familiarity of the surroundings did little to ease the cold dread that had settled in my bones. Once inside, the darkness of my own home felt oppressive, a stark contrast to the sanctuary it usually provided. I flicked on the lights, chasing away the shadows that seemed to slither away reluctantly. A deep, unsettling silence filled the air, as if my house was holding its breath, waiting. I headed straight to my study, the need to document what had occurred driving me. I pulled out my journal, the pages now filled with notes and scribbles from my visits to Hollow House. As I wrote, a cold breeze fluttered the pages, the air whispering through the room like a cautious sigh. I paused, my pen hovering above the paper. The window was closed. Shrugging off the chill, I continued writing, my hand barely keeping up with the rush of thoughts. Then, a soft thud echoed from the living room, startling me from my reverie. Heart pounding, I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed up by the house's silence. No answer came, just the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I stepped into the hallway, the air cool and still around me. As I moved toward the living room, the temperature seemed to drop with each step, a familiar coldness that I had felt in the attic of Hollow House. Reaching the living room, I flicked the light switch, but the room remained draped in darkness. The bulbs, I realized, must have burned out. A thin slice of moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a pale glow over the room. Then I saw it, a figure, standing by the window, its outline blurred and indistinct. Frozen, I could only watch as the figure slowly turned towards me, its features obscured in shadow. A low, mournful moan filled the room, and a voice, barely a whisper, said, "You brought us with you." Panic surged through me, a primal fear taking hold. This wasn't possible. I had left them at Hollow House, or so I had thought. The figure moved closer, limping, its movements jerky and unnatural. "You cannot escape us," it hissed, the voice a chilling blend of the many I had heard in the house. Backing away, I stumbled over a rug, nearly falling. The figure continued its slow, relentless approach. "What do you want from me?" I cried out, my back hitting the wall. There was nowhere left to run. "We are bound to you now," the figure whispered, standing mere feet away. "You freed us, but in doing so, you gave us new life, tethered to yours." Desperation clawed at me, a wild, frantic energy. "How do I free myself?" I managed to say, my voice trembling. The figure paused, tilting its head as if pondering my question. "There is no freedom for you now. You are part of us, as we are part of you. Forever." A scream built in my throat, but before I could release it, the room filled with light, blinding and intense. When my vision cleared, the figure was gone, but the cold remained, a permanent chill that settled deep within my bones. The realization dawned on me, a horrific truth that I could no longer deny. Hollow House was no longer a distant nightmare. It had followed me, or perhaps I had brought it back. The spirits, once confined to the decayed walls of that forsaken mansion, were now a part of my world. In the days that followed, my home became a prison, each room a reminder of the night I had unwittingly bound my fate to the spirits of Hollow House. Visitors spoke of the cold, of the subtle whispers that filled the rooms, of the shadows that seemed to watch them. I knew then that I would never be free, that the ties I had with Hollow House were indelible, eternal. As I write this, the whispers echo around me, a constant murmur, a never-ending reminder of my fate. I am a part of Hollow House, and it is a part of me, forever intertwined, a ghost among ghosts in the shadow of the house that haunts me still.